Hello everyone! Welcome back to a very special video. I'm DTM as always, and we have our new Young Special Heroes banner featuring these Tellius characters. So yeah, we have young Mia, Soren, Ilyana, and dual Ike, which is really exciting. And in this video, we'll be discussing their best builds, analyzing them, and honestly talking about how I feel about these units and whether or not you should summon for them. And yeah, before we get into all of that, be sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell, all that jazz to help support the channel. Only takes 5 seconds to subscribe, but it truly does help this channel out a lot, and I really do appreciate it. Seriously, it just would mean so much if you would just subscribe. Again, only takes 5 seconds, but it does mean the world. But yeah, let's get started with young Mia. So young Mia is a Red Sword infantry, and we'll talk about that, but she comes with Sharp War Sword, which, if all the conditions are met, she gets Slaying, Phantom Speed, all stats +5, and if she starts the turn within 2 spaces of an ally, she gets NFU and Dodge as positive status effects. So this is not something that is inherent into the weapon. You have to be within 2 spaces of an ally to gain that positive status effect, sort of like a 2-space joint hone, for example. So that is something to keep in mind when using her. She also comes with a new skill in Speed, Defense, Tempo, which is essentially a null guard and null special acceleration. It neutralizes guard effects and special acceleration effects, sort of like OG Byleth's Crater Sword. And yeah, with this skill and her weapon, she is basically a 2022 version of OG Byleth. Like, if you have Byleth with Spurn, Byleth would have the exact same effects as young Mia. The only effects that Mia would have in addition would be the Phantom Speed, which is not really an additional effect, but just helps her activate her effects on her own, like Dodge. So, yeah, honestly, this is a very standard unit. There isn't anything special outside of that. She is the latest Red Sword infantry. Yay! So yeah, very basic and doesn't really have any unique effects, and honestly, she's as standard as Red Sword infantries come, and honestly, other Red Sword infantries can do just fine instead of her, like Seliph, Chrom, Mask Marth. Her being a 5-star exclusive and being this ununique is really unfortunate, even though like she has all this effect, which really just emphasizes how hard it is to stand out as a Red Sword infantry. But she's the latest iteration, so she is definitely going to be a very strong unit. And so when building her, there are, I think, 2 ways that you can build her. First, you can basically take advantage of her base kit, especially with that Speed, Def, Tempo, neutralizing guard effects. With Flashing Blade, she can hit with consistent Gale Force procs. And with Odd Tempest, she obviously has the reach to do that on odd turns, which is really important for ether raids. Blade Session is obviously there just to give a lot more power, but you can substitute that in with Attack Speed Solo or something like that if you are using her as an initiator. But yeah, very basic budget kit. You really only need to inherit Gale Force, and she's good to go. And yeah, and another build, if you don't really want her to be more player phase, but instead more enemy phase, is to actually take Distant Dart from dual Ike, which we'll get into, and use Vital Astra. Mia does have Slaying, so with Time's Pulse, she can get Vital Astra pre-charge at the start of every turn. And honestly, like, you can even like swap out the B for something like Spurn to double down on that damage reduction, or just swap it for like something like Null Counter Disrupt. Like, you're going to be very consistent in being able to proc Vital Astra. So honestly, you can swap Speed, Def, Tempo with Null C Disrupt and be perfectly fine. That's just there because it's in her base kit, and if you're engaging in multiple combats, it could be good in order to ensure that you have those special procs when facing against units with guard. So yeah, the next unit we have is young Soren, and young Soren is a colorless infantry mage with Adroit War Tome, which grants him Slaying and Attack Res +6, and in addition, if his res is greater than the foe's res, then depending on how big the difference between that is, he gets some effects. And those effects are guaranteed follow-up attack, fire sweep versus physical units, and cuts damage reduction by 50%, which is something similar to the effect that Dual Leaf has. So yeah, basically you just subtract your res to the foe's res, and depending on that amount, if it's greater than 1, you get the guaranteed follow-up, greater than 5, fire sweep, greater than 10, cut damage reduction by half. And so with this preference weapon, he actually functions really well as an infantry nuke. Like, being able to shred through damage reduction, even though it doesn't like completely pierce it, I mean, it's still very powerful, and we all know how powerful Dual Leaf is because of that effect, among other things, of course. But Soren being colorless allows him to have neutral matchups in every single case besides Raven Tomes, but you're not really going to be facing that much Raven Tomes with damage reduction, I feel. And the Fire Sweep effect versus physical units provides a lot of safety for a lot of far-safe units like Brave Hector, Valentine's Fae. Of course, the big elephant in the room is that this does nothing against Ascendant Fjorm, and honestly, I feel like Ascendant Fjorm would probably just wreck Soren, because the damage reduction halving does not affect like special damage reduction, like Ice Mirror. And with Ascendant Fjorm being a very popular far-safe unit, unfortunately, he isn't able to use his preference weapon to its fullest potential. And also having infantry movement does hurt him in where you can actually use him, as he doesn't have the range like Dual Leaf does. Now granted, we are shifting away from a high threat range meta in defense right now to more like Catria Balls, so you can definitely use young Soren in Catria Balls and things like that. Maybe not in Astra Season anymore. But for something like in Summoner's Duels or something like that, unfortunately, like in there, range is everything. And so, yeah, it is very unfortunate he is infantry, but like thematically it makes sense. And he'll still be a very powerful unit that can just nuke through a lot of bulky units, especially if they have damage reduction. And so when building him, the first build here is basically a standard res nuke build, where you just have his base kit with Mirror Impact, have more attack and res to, again, boost that res in order to get the fullest of his effects. A low attack res, I think, would be his optimal B here. Unfortunately, it's not budget, but you can get it from Ilyana as a 4-star focus. But if you're not willing to deviate from summoning on colorless, you can always just run guard. And Times Pulse is useful because it helps reduce that cooldown of Iceberg to just 1. So if you double, you should be able to proc Iceberg, which does a huge amount of res damage. And then, of course, attack res solo, again, pushing that attack and res. He does actually have a decent speed stack, which makes it not too unreasonable for him to stack speed, which is why the build on the right is all about stacking speed and res. Swift Impact, obviously, more speed and more res with the impact effect. Low speed res, same thing, trying to boost that speed and res. And Joint Drive, speed is there again to boost that speed, because if Soren like faces against something that has no follow-up or denies follow-up, like Wary Fighter effects or something like that, that speed provides a crutch in order to still double. Now unfortunately, like, because we aren't running Times Pulse here, we have to run Ruptured Sky in order to be consistent. But I mean, you can swap out Joint Drive speed with Times Pulse and probably be perfectly fine. And yeah, Blade Session, again, boosting your damage output and the speed. But yeah, next we have young Ilyana, who is our 4-star focus unit of this batch. She comes with a preference weapon, Windy War Tome, which grants res +3 and inflicts attack res -6 on the foe, and grants Dragon Wall. In addition, if the unit's res is greater than foe's res +5, she also has the impact effect, or prevents foe's follow-up attack effect. And so this makes her a very, very bulky res tank. And so the idea with Ilyana here is that you want to stack res for Dragon Wall, and basically any mage that is not red will very, do very little. Like, she has a lot of res, and having Dragon Wall on top of that will just make her unstoppable for a lot of mages, even some red mages as well. She is hampered by her very poor defense. I mean, it's not that end of the world because she can tank physical somewhat due to having Dragon Wall and can stack defense to help increase that tank roll, but obviously that is very hard to do with like, what, 18-ish res or something. And so yeah, you probably want to avoid any physical combat unless you like really stack defense. But yeah, her main focus is very easy, just a standard mage tank, stacking res, and just being targeted by opponents that target res. And so when building her, the build on the left is, I think, the most straightforward build. We have Mirror Stance 3, which is obviously boosting her res, providing guard effect, and boosting her attack. She comes with low attack res, which is probably her best, again, neutralizing the bonuses on attack and res for the enemy, which really helps. And then for the C, we have Joint Distant Guard, which just boosts both her res and defense. She's, again, going to be a range tank, so Joint Distant Guard here makes sense. And yeah, attack res form, again, boosting the attack and res. I feel like I've said that a lot. And so yeah, the playstyle with her on the left is very straightforward. Just tank ranged mages, or like things like that. If you want to be a bit more creative, I don't know how well this will do, but I did mention stacking defense, and well, I'm going to put my money where my mouth is. This is a build that makes her an all-around tank, including melee combats. She has Close Reversal here, which boosts the defense by 5. Joint Drive defense boosts it by another 4, and then Def Res solo boosts it by another 6. So if you're keeping count, that's plus 15, including the low attack res, that is effectively plus 18 defense for like 41 defense. And that in combination with Windy Wartome's Dragon Wall effect will definitely allow her to survive physical threats. And yeah, this just makes her bulky all around. It does require a lot of work, and obviously you're losing a little bit on the stacking of res that you could have. So again, I don't know exactly how well this will do, but it is an option for those that really want to make her tank everything. And do let me know if you actually manage to build something like this and see how it performs. But yeah, last but certainly not least, we have young Dual Ike. So young Dual Ike is obviously supposed to be the star of this banner, and he comes with Sturdy War Sword, which grants attack plus 3, all stats plus 5, and if Ike has a damaging special, and if he is within an ally within 4 spaces, he gets the following effects depending on the number of allies within 4 spaces. If it's greater than or equal to 1, he halves the special charge by 50% before his first attack. If greater than or equal to 2, he gets damage reduction based on the max cooldown of his currently equipped special, and if it's greater than or equal to 3, he grants no follow-up. In addition, he has a dual skill that inflicts attack speed minus 6, guard, and special cooldown count plus 2 within 5 rows and columns. Okay, so taking this all together, the special charge minus 50% before the attack is very unique. It turns Radiant Ether to a 2-turn special at max, right? So you have to understand, like, this is max special charge minus 50%. So if Radiant Ether is at 3 cooldown, you'll still get minus 2 before his first attack. So this synergizes really well with 4-charge specials in that it allows you to consistently be able to proc those 4-charge specials, and therefore synergizes with like Radiant Ether. And of course, having that higher charge allows for more damage reduction. So with effects like Breath Seals or Brave Lucina, you're able to get consistent procs of Radiant Ether. Basically, if you're on like 4 cooldown with Radiant Ether and an enemy attacks into you, basically, because of Breath, the enemy's attack cuts that down to 2, and then with this effect, it cuts it down a further 2, so that Radiant Ether is ready to be procced on your first attack. So yeah, and this helps cut through damage and provides healing, which is really good. But other than that, unfortunately, like, he just is another Red Sword infantry and is really unlikely to stand out or to be meta impactful. Because if you really think about it, if you run Radiant Ether, he's just a standard Red Sword infantry that is replacing something like Moonbow or Ruptured Sky or Vital Astra with Radiant Ether. And yeah, Radiant Ether is a really good special to be able to run consistently, but unfortunately, it is starting to show its age. Like, I still personally think it's good. Like, Luna plus Soul will always be good, especially if you can get it to consistently proc, but in the age of things like Vital Astra, or more egregiously, Holy Knight Aura, yeah, Radiant Ether is definitely starting to show its age. And unfortunately, I don't think there's really a place for young Ike right now. And the dual skill, I feel, has very limited uses. This is a dual skill that you can't really run on Ether Raid's offense, and isn't really that useful in Arena, I feel. So the only place that you can use this dual skill is in Summer's duels, and is really only for Hardy Fighter saves, or pre-charged Lethality Yuris. Now, I think this dual skill in Summer's duels is actually really good, because Hardy Fighter saves are like everywhere, and just being able to turn that off will allow like Lethality Yuris to just completely destroy these hardy saves. So in Summer's duels, I actually think this dual skill can be very powerful. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, I do not think that overall, dual Ike is that going to be that meta impactful in those modes. Maybe in Summer's duels, again, because of just that dual skill, but even then, you have to deal with like dual Crom, being able to pre-charge those specials on a whim. And so, yeah, unfortunately, I do not think Ike will be able to stand out as a Red Sword infantry, as it is very hard to do so, and yeah. In talking about the builds for Ike, though, I do think he'll still work very well as a unit, and so the build on the left is a very basic build with just his base kit. If you just slap in Darting Breath, as I mentioned in talking about his weapon, Darting Breath, when an enemy hits into you, Darting Breath will reduce the cooldown to 2 with that enemy's attack, and then his weapon will reduce it down a further 2 to get that Radiant Ether pre-charge when he first attacks, or counterattacks into the enemy. And so that is very, very basic, and he'll still get damage reduction and a no follow-up, assuming, of course, that he has the allies within his base to do so. If you want to be a bit more creative, you can run him with Vital Astra and just stack speed all the way. I personally don't think this is that good because according to Ike's weapon effect description, the proc to Vital Astra, or the charge to Vital Astra, happens in combat, so I don't think you get the damage reduction in combat. And of course, this also limits the amount of damage reduction you get. But if you want to like purely focus on speed, this is an option that you can do. Like Distant Dark gives you speed. Speed Depth Tempo 3 will make sure that you're always able to get hit by Vital Astra, or like proc Vital Astra, and then a Joint Drive speed and attack speed solo, again, stacking that speed to ensure that Ike will consistently proc that. And again, this is if you don't want to run a breath skill, or don't have Brave Lucina, or something like that. You just want to be simple and have Vital Astra. But honestly, I recommend just sticking with Radiant Ether and going with the Darting Breath route. But it is something that you can test out. So yeah, those are all the units on this banner, and I guess the question that is now presented to us is, should you summon on this banner? Now obviously we all have different needs and different playstyles in how we play Fae, but if you're going to look for a recommendation from me, unfortunately, I have to say no. you shouldn't summon on this banner. Obviously, of course, if one of these units is your favorite, then by all means, go ahead and summon. Like, you should be summoning for your favorites anyways, if that's how you want to play. But in terms of the actual unit value themselves, unfortunately, I feel like none of these units are really special and stand out. Like, these are just Red Sword infantries and infantry mages at the end of the day. And, like, Soren's cutting through damage reduction is cool, but we do have a lot of ways to cut through damage reduction nowadays with things like MENACE, Dual Leaf himself, Legendary Nana, or just Deadeye or Lethality. And Ilyana, even though Dragon Wall makes her very bulky, she doesn't have anything else that will make her stand out from being a res tank from something like Legendary or not Legendary, Resplendent Micaiah, for example. Now, there is a possibility that Ike could be meta impactful in Summoner's Duels just because of that dual skill. It remains to be seen if he becomes prevalent enough, but if any of these units are to become meta impactful, I would say Ike, just for that dual skill in SD. But I personally don't think it's worth summoning for, and you definitely don't need these units to succeed in any means. Like, you'll be fine with what you have in your barracks, and you definitely don't need these new units to do well in something like Ether Raids or Summoner's Duels, for example. Obviously, though, again, if these units are your favorites, feel free to summon for these units. No one's going to stop you, and that is a great thing to invest in your favorites and being able to use them. And again, I don't think any of these units are bad. I think these units are good and will do very well, and you'll definitely find success. But if you had to ask me if it's worth 150 orbs, 150 precious orbs to summon for, unfortunately, I have to recommend against it. But yeah, those are my thoughts and analysis on this new Young Special banner from the Tellius games. And yeah, at the end of the day, I do feel really bad for those that might have wanted a more unique banner. Like, I know a lot of Ike fans, at least I know, wish that Ike was anything other than a sword unit. Because I feel like, honestly, this is really lacking in creativity. Like, compared to, like, the first Young banner with, like, Young Sita with her all-effective weapon, or Young Merrick, or even, like, last year's Young banner with Young Tana having super guidance, or not super guidance, super teleportation, or Innis being actually the best unit as a freebie. This banner, unfortunately, I feel, honestly, I don't like it. And I really wish IS was more creative in the units that they've made for this. Like, I feel like Tellius fans deserve better than another Red Sword Infantry Ike, for example. Honestly, that's just my opinion, though. Feel free to respond in the comments how you feel about these units. I would love to hear them. And again, I don't mean to, like, knock anyone down for liking this banner, because at the end of the day, these are really good units and with amazing art and will do very well. And yeah, if you enjoyed, be sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell, all that jazz to help support the channel. Only takes 5 seconds to subscribe, but it truly does help support this channel out a lot, and I really do appreciate all the constant support. And let me know if you summoned on this banner and how your results were, and what you plan to do with these units. And yeah, thank you all so much for watching, and see you all next time.